ever heard of the phrase, go figure it out yourself? Well, if you did, maybe you used it. And then how did it work out for you? And when you heard it, how did it work out for you? Well, for me, it doesn't work out. And for most people, it doesn't work out. Why? Because when we ask, we need support. We don't know how to do it. It's not about laziness. It's not about not wanting to understand it. It's about, but where do I go from here? Now, there is a difference between not being able to screw anything up. So it's done sort of under supervision, say like a test environment or basically a safe environment. And then there are also the environments, and it does matter because if things aren't handled appropriately, it might cost you money, it might cost you respect from your clients, and it also might give you more work. So, me being Gen X, an entrepreneur, a coach, and lately also called a connection catalyst, I'm sort of the bridge builder, not sort of, I am the bridge builder between various parties, including Gen X and both millennials and Gen Z. So, how do we improve that communication? And what if we were to take a look at your company? What would you notice? Let's start a little bit. Let's start with a little story I had with someone yesterday. She's also Gen X. We are the same year of birth, actually, which is the year of Starbucks and the Hard Rock cafes. And when we talked about neurodivergence, she was like, does it exist in Europe too? Now, here is how this all went about. And then I'm going to share a little bit about the framework that I want to share with you. So she asked me to come over to Amsterdam. She's from Utah, and she had time this weekend. And I was like, oh, well, that's cool. Well, this weekend, the New Year's Eve weekend, let's call it that way. So, so she had a little trouble finding me, but we have this community from Brendan Burchard. It's called Ultra, and well, the people from Ultra knew that I live in Holland. So when she said, "Is there anyone who knows anyone in Holland?" A couple of people said, "Yes, we do. You need to go meet up with Lady Lexi." So she got my phone number, reached out to me, and I said, "Sure, I'll come over." Little did I know that on the way over, I would suddenly be entrapped in snow, hail, and accidents. So I went there, and just before I went there, I was like, oh, hang on, it's 7:00. Brendan is going live at 7, and he was going to do a 2-hour live. I was like, you know what, I'm going to listen to it while driving. And I didn't expect that I would almost be able to hear the entire live because of the accidents on the road. But anyway, I went there. I didn't get a response straight away, but by the time that I had sent the question, are you listening to Brendan, as in Brendan Burchard, she was like, oh, I need to listen to him too. Now, I had no clue if I could park over there in Amsterdam. So normally I have a permit to park in Amsterdam for free because I have a disability card. And the disability card had to be prolonged when I got my new one. So I hadn't asked for it, but I am allowed to park on the disabled handicap parking spots. So I was like, okay, how are we going to do this? Well, I'll find a spot. So I went to the first spot that was actually on a card and figured out, oh, okay, that's 7 o'clock. It's still 7 o'clock in the evening and it's past 7. So I had to look for new ones. Now, here's the thing. Like I told you, the moment that I went over there in The Hague, everything was hunky-dory fine. No problems on the road whatsoever. And then all of a sudden, I passed the airport and I saw this red line on the map. So I was like, oh, well, we are going to have a delay. That delay was there. And practically where the cars were being towed on the tow truck, there was all this white stuff on the road. And at first I was like, is that the salt that they use when things are frozen? And I was like, but it's a little bit much. Could it be something else? And I was like, nah, this cannot be snow or hail because we didn't have any. But, you know, the moment that I went through the tunnel, I already had noticed that it was soaking wet. And I was like, where is this coming from? Well, driving on, I knew it had been snowing and it still was snowing over there in Amsterdam. So there I was looking for a parking spot. And I'll admit I've never been happier that they lowered down the speed in Amsterdam to 30 kilometers an hour, which is like 20 miles an hour. I was like, okay, that gives me the time to see how to navigate everywhere, especially since I didn't know where I was going. So it's not that I'm completely unfamiliar with Amsterdam, so I know certain spots, but to get there, well, that's a different story. And this place where she was staying was new to me. So like I said, I went to the first one, was up till 7, next one up till 7. And then I was like, okay, I'll just go somewhere and I'll see what happens. Now, the road towards her hotel was closed off, probably because of the fireworks the day before. I'm not sure, but that's the assumption we had. So I couldn't go there. So the navigation tried to get me back on that one road that was closed off. And I was like, I'm just go and follow my instincts. So I'm sort of used to send some sort of message into the air. I've noticed that it does seem to work. And well, I asked for a place where I could park with the handicap parking card. So no luck until at some point I looked at my left and was like, oh, but hang on. I can go there and there's no time limit. But how do I get to her? So I went there, parked the car. We had contact. And to my surprise, she walked over because she knew what she had to do. And there we were, meeting up. 2 people from opposite sides of the world, the opposite sides of the Atlantic Ocean, meeting one another under, for her, very normal circumstances. Well, I can tell you she was better equipped for this weather than I was. Fortunately, I did have a raincoat in my car because I hadn't expected to rain, let alone snow. So it was not really hail. I think it was more snow. But she knew where to go. I had pointed out some places for her to go to. She had been there already. So she said, okay, let's go. Come on for a walk. And there we went. And then when we were at that street where there were many restaurants, so she had given me an idea of what she wanted to eat. And we stopped by this Italian restaurant. And it was the second one in a row. And I was like, okay, that's cool. I said, no, let's not go back to the first one. Let's stay here. And when we went inside, it was a great atmosphere, and we had the last available table. So we were in luck. I was drenched. I was soaking wet. My hair was soaking wet. My trousers were soaking wet. But it instantly clicked. If you look at the pictures of us, then the first picture, it's like we're knowing one another or getting to know one another. And the last one is we're having so much fun. And well, basically, she was surprised when she heard that neurodivergence is not limited to the US. Yes, it's over here in Europe and in the Netherlands as well. Now, why do I talk about this? Because I want to talk about the system scan. Now, this live is about the generational gap between Gen X and Gen Z primarily, but let's just take a look at what basically happened. So let me write something down. So we are talking about the processor. And why am I using the word processor? Because I have an IT background. I was 20 years in IT before actually in the last years that I was still in IT, I decided to, actually earlier, up till the last century, I was fully in IT. And then at some point in that last bit, someone said, you need to go do you need to become a fitness instructor. And that's what I did. And then I became a medical fitness instructor. And now we're going past the century. So I worked both in IT. I also worked as a fitness instructor. At some point, I became a sports masseuse. Then people started asking me to please massage them. I also became a therapist. And that's how I got the name Jumping Bunny, Duracell Bunny, always busy. So if you see this little one, that's where my nickname comes from, because she's always going on and on and on and on. And nowadays, I've adopted her as my inner kid. And after I became a coach as well, what you have learned as a therapist, you need to forget as a coach. And from there on, I started working for myself. So what I wanted to share with you was something which is about the processors. It's about the original software, so the legacy, and it's about the connection, which has to do with alignment. I wrote it down like here. Now, when I went there to Amsterdam, I missed a few things. I missed that it was going to be snowing over there. I had no clue. My data was basically based on what I had seen in The Hague and surroundings. So I was completely surprised with what happened. However, trusting that it would work out, it did work out. And it was kind of funny that the one who made it work out eventually was actually the American lady. She's called Blanca, by the way. She was the one taking me through Amsterdam. So, okay, yes, I did drive to Amsterdam first. And at some point I was like, well, what on earth am I doing here? It was literally what I was thinking. And then I was like, you know what? I'm here anyway. So let's continue on and we'll see where it takes me. So I had learned to trust my intuition, that it would guide me to a place and that I would be smart enough to look around and find a place because, well, the signs, they are visible. So, and well, it's not that I've never been in Amsterdam, so I have enough experience in cities I do not know. Although I have to say, when everything is covered in snow, it does look quite different. So that's why I said I was glad that the speed was a little bit slower than normal. And when we connected, we had this understanding for one another. She told me things I didn't know, just like I told her things she didn't know. And well, those of you who know that I'm about speaking up, be authentic, gain perspective, they know that when I hear stories about people being ignored because of the reason someone passed on, well, that doesn't feel good on my end. And I'm the first one to actually teach others to do speak up about it. So it was nice to actually have that rapport and feel like, hey, we are connecting on so many levels. Of course, we also connected on Ultra from Brendan Burchard. I think she was a founding member, just like me. And it's, you know, there's so much that we picked up on also during the live. And we got to discuss that. And we also got to show others like, hey, I'm here, I found her. So it was kind of cool. Now, fast forward to what I shared earlier. I talked to her about that I always wanted to support people speaking up, especially since I wasn't understood by the medical society when I had twisted my ankle, torn a ligament, and a bone shifted with the tendon still attached to it. And well, for years, for over a decade, I've been struggling with it. And for like 4 years minimum, I had to struggle to get the right surgeries. So we talked a little about that. And then we talked a little bit more about what I do nowadays. So I didn't realize this until recently, but basically I've been working with neurodivergents for as long as I can remember, especially guiding the ones locally over here. And for those who do not know, neurodivergents, those are the ones who have a different wiring of the brain. So we see things differently. Quite often it's top down, and what makes sense for other people when it comes to answers is something that doesn't necessarily apply to people who are neurodivergent because they can see solutions from multiple perspectives. So if you look at things, say you look at a parking spot, but you only see a picture, and they will ask you, can you park over there or not? Then my first assumption is, okay, where are the signs? Are there any signs? Okay, so I don't see colored lines on the sidewalk, but what is it that I'm not seeing? And that's basically how a neurodivergent mind works differently. And that's why sometimes things are answered literally. Now, combining all of this, what I've noticed is that one question that some people like to say, go figure it out. And the sad thing is, it's not something that employees say when they talk to neurodivergent individuals. When they say, okay, so what exactly do you want me to do? Because they're like, okay, didn't you hear me? And then they might be inclined to repeat the question in the exact same manner, which of course is not helpful at all. And so the person who asked then reverts back to what makes the most sense to me. But that can be completely different compared to neurotypical people. So those are the people who often think alike. Now, here is a little, for me, still recently unknown fact. It seems that the number of neurodivergent people is going to climb, especially amongst the generation A, the generation Alpha. I didn't know that, but then again, I'm not surprised. So knowing that people are addressed that way, they don't get it, they end up on my end. Because if you constantly hear no, and you are constantly considered stupid or lazy or whatever it is, well, that doesn't help for your self-esteem, especially if you know that you do want to make it work out, but you don't know how to. So when it comes to perspective, and actually, especially for the young ones, but also those of my generation, to find perspective again, I talk with them about what it is that they are missing, and I serve as the one speaking up for them, and hence the term connection catalyst. So I translate it in a certain way, so I'm the bridge between various parties, and it's like I hear certain things and then it's like, oh, hang on, this is how it works, this is why you say this, and that's why the other understands that. And it goes actually quite quickly. I can very quickly scan top down what's going on. So I'll be asking a ton of questions, and then I'll pretty quickly get an idea of, oh, this is what's not working out. So let me get back to what I wrote down. So to start with the processor. So what happens if the CPU or the processor, so I'm just using mainframe terms here, just for the fun of it, is not working correctly? Well, then it goes slow, and you could say there is a leakage of energy, power, capacity, however you want to describe it. Things are not working out for you. And when we compare this to the Gen X business owners, then we see that we have been raised in a non-IT age. But apart from that, a lot of us went home, and then there were no parents. I was lucky. I had my mom there with cookies and tea, orange juice at times too. But a lot of my friends and fellow students, we weren't in high school yet, but they didn't have anyone at home because both their parents would be working if they already had both their parents. So it was a different time and age for those who had to literally figure it out themselves. It wasn't said to them. There was just no one around. So we were treated without kids' gloves. If we wanted money, we had to work for it. Just, go do it. And we still have that same mentality now, especially the business owners. And the good thing about this is a lot of us are very inventive. I mean, you have to be, otherwise, why be a business owner? And well, at some point when you're a business owner, you need to have a team. And a lot of people who at some point became a manager or a business owner and suddenly had to deal with a team weren't trained to work with a team. So they didn't have people skills. So in the 2 decades that I worked in IT, and I always say I was raised in the mainframe world. So those were the big computers, like over a room big. Nowadays it's like this, but back then it was huge. And, just to be able to work with 3 gigabytes, and that was a lot. That was huge. I still remember the talk when someone said to me, and this one has the capacity of 3 gigabytes. And was an entire room was needed in order to make that happen. And nowadays we have like, how many gigabytes? Well, 500 something on a USB stick, on the thumb drive. So, 512. So this is so completely different. Anyway, if you got raised in that time, then things were primarily based on skills. So what were you good at? What are you good at? And yes, I ran into seeing managers who weren't managers all of the time. Now, I was in luck because the first 7.5 years, well, actually, I already had worked prior to that in IT. I was able to work for a company called Pink Elephant. They are now, I think, called Old Elephant, mergers, all those kind of things. And then they started over again. And they trained us. So we were never alone the first time around when we would go to a new employer. So Pink was our employer, and then they would lend us to other companies. Being trained, whether it was at Pink or by someone from Pink Elephant on the job, made all the difference. So they made sure that we already had a good basis before we would go to whatever client. And then somewhere between 1 and 3 months, we would walk with them, and then we would take over and do everything on our own. And like I said, it worked kind of well. So in order to make sure that we were doing okay, we had regular meetings. They would ask us about where we were, what we wanted to achieve. And of course, at some point, I saw the same things happening at the various companies I was working at. Now, later on, I started working no longer as what they call an external employee. I would be working for the companies themselves, including IBM, which of course was a party for me because I felt like a kid in a playground. But that one thing, people not being people managers, hiring people who would change things at the top so the stockholders would be happy. I would be looking at it and I would be like, yeah, that works on the short term, but how's that going to work out long term? And also I saw what all those reorganizations did to people, and not knowing what to expect, that was major. So when I started working, it was normal to be working somewhere like forever. And actually, my brother is still working at the same company where he started working at when he came from high school, well, university. And well, I didn't have that luxury. And, we each have our own path. But my brother was the one who actually pointed out neurodivergence, because a lot of people in IT are on the spectrum. Now, if you fast forward, I've had many talks with people, and whereas one of the things that I always wanted to do was change the culture in companies to a more open, respectful, and understanding culture where everyone could grow, also realizing that the people who should do things on a strategic level were actually doing things on an operational level. I knew this is not the way it's supposed to be. Coaching a number of these people, managers, business owners, I realized that they never had received any training in people skills. And working with the young ones out there, at first with the millennials and now also with Gen Z, and actually also with the kiddos out there, Gen A, I quickly noticed that I heard the same thing over and over again. There was no guidance and they didn't know what to do. And as a result, it didn't work out. On the other hand, I heard I don't know what it is with these people. They don't know how to be resourceful. That was the major complaint. They don't know how to be resourceful. And that's correct, because if you go to school, and of course there's a shortage of teachers nowadays, good teachers, and you get told to go figure it out yourself. There's the internet, go to YouTube, Google it, go figure it out. And now, of course, we have AIs telling us what we need to do. Well, that's not very helpful. So they know a lot about content, how to do certain things, but they know little about context, which is why to do certain things and how to see it when it comes to the bigger picture. So, for instance, when you are a business owner, then you are about income. So you think about, okay, what's the service or the product I'm offering? Do I want extras, upgrades? Consider it with like a TV channel. You can give a TV channel, or you can provide not just the regular TV channels, but also the very special ones, maybe sports channels or the ones with crime on there, different topics. But if you say you get all the channels and then people only get the basic channels, well, that's of course not going to work out. So the one who's talking to you needs to know what they are talking about. So for instance, I recently got glass fiber over here, and I said to the one who installed it, where are the other Wi-Fi enhancers? So they're like Wi-Fi, we would say points, like these devices you put somewhere and then the frequency gets enhanced, or better said, it gets repeated. So everywhere in the building, there's a good reception. Well, it's not here. I said, well, yeah, I noticed. I hoped that you would have had some. He said, well, call the people. And so at first I reached out to the one who had sold it to me. And then I reached out to the company itself, and just like the one who had installed everything had said I should do, and they were amazing. We had such a nice talk, and well, now I have the 3 Wi-Fi enhancers. Let's call it like that. So here's already like discrepancy between what one said and what the other said. So when we were talking about cost, I said, so okay, so do these costs include installation? How about the amount of data that is going across the line? And he actually had to look it up. He didn't know. So I was apparently the first one who asked critical and more specific questions, which makes sense because in my last job, I was a contract manager for IT systems. So having to deal with fines when the ones applying it didn't live up to what they promised they would do, and vice versa. It was important to, and that we were talking about huge amounts. Every 3 months that we would get together, like 6 zeros at least. So it made sense to, pay attention to what's going on. And a lot of the new generations or the younger generations, they don't know, because how could they know if they've never been taught? So we as Gen Xers, we learned through practice, through experience. Of course, we studied too, but a lot was common thinking. And common thinking is not always common practice. Well, that might be true, but what if you're missing part of the common thinking, what's normal or standard for other people? And what I've noticed is if you do not guide the young ones out there properly, like I said, they get stuck. At one point in time, one way or another, they get stuck. So whether it's at school and they don't finish school, or they go to a different level, way beyond what they are capable of doing, but at least being able to get a certificate or a diploma, then you know that something is wrong. And when those people get hired, even when they have finished with amazing numbers, then you can wonder, okay, but how good is their training? And especially with COVID, a lot of people didn't go to school. They had to be homeschooled. And you could wonder how much supervision was applied. So I remember that the first generation, the first people who graduated, their diploma wasn't worth as much as from the previous generations is not the best word, but the previous ones who had received their degree, their diploma. So in order to be able to have them pass, they had to lower the standards, and that became a problem pretty quickly. So when we talk about software and we talk about the original software, then we are basically talking about the legacy. And the question is that thing that you started out with. So we've been talking about the hardware, and is it functioning up to capacity, or is it slowing down? And now we're talking about the software, which is what's being installed. Is it running the way it should? Or maybe there are some bugs in there and you didn't know. Now, when we compare this to ourselves, we compare this to our brains and our mindsets, then what if we haven't upgraded to what other people might know? So basically to the other generations. And what if those other generations haven't been taught what we know? Then you have a huge miscommunication. And so we can say everything from back in the day was always better. But then again, if you hold on to it really rigidly, then there's no way you are going to understand the newer generations. You just can't, because you are living by the rules that you set yourself. And that's when we come to the connection. So when we talk about the connection, it's about how can we make both parties talk to one another? How can we create alignment so that all components in the system, so both the hardware, but also the source code, so the original software, is actually equipped to work with the new devices in the network, in this case, the team. And well, as I explained, that can be a huge problem if no one knows how to understand one another. And then I get back to that one remark: go figure it out. Well, I'm highly allergic to that one. It basically means, oh, I need to figure it out myself. Why did I even bother ask you? Well, if I have to figure it out, then I'll do that. So basically all communication is done, because why would you go back to someone and ask if it's okay if all you got was go figure it out? Expectations are set at that moment at, oh, I need to go figure it out. It has no use to ask any questions. So there won't be any check if you're doing things correctly. And that's a major problem. So the question then becomes, when do the managers or the business owners realize that things aren't going the way they should? Well, they realize it as soon as they see the numbers. When they see that what they can charge their clients, whether it's for products or for the services, isn't as much as they had expected. So numbers are down compared to what their expectations were. And then when they go and look into it, like what has happened, then they'll find out that a lot of those things hadn't been written down. Why? Because they didn't know any better. And well, for a lot of people, when you say what they need to do, it feels like control. And a lot of ways to actually get a better grip on people is by exerting more control, but not in the right way. I mean, being there like really from 9 to 5 or whatever your window of time is, doesn't make anyone work harder or more efficient. I loved it when I would start working somewhere and it was like, you come in whenever you want, whatever location you want, you have a place to work from home. And when you want to come over, you come over. Wow, that worked. The only thing was, I expect you to come up with results. And if you do it a lot quicker, you'd better not tell me, because then I have to give you more work. Okay, good on you. So knowing this, I was used to freedom. So whenever I had a manager who didn't know how to manage, who didn't have people skills, and they said like, okay, be there at this hour and do this, that, and the other, especially when I had started my own business on the side, well, that didn't work out very well. It was one of the reasons why at some point I was like, you know what, I don't want to do this anymore. But there was a major other reason, and it was me being neurodivergent and also being one of the younger ones, but in a specific capacity. I would see things that would cause problems down the line, and I would say so, and then I would be told, doesn't matter what you think, we're not there yet, and the rest doesn't understand it. So I basically was silenced. And at some point I was like, you know what? You want me to come in early that doesn't work out with my schedule because I had to do certain things before going into the office, and you're silencing me, I'm not going to come over anymore. I mean, I had different clients anyway, so it was a complete mismatch. It made sense that I was in that department. It didn't make sense that I had to work with my colleagues because they did something completely different than I did. But it did help me to know the basics for the other clients because one was linked to the other one, for them at least. So the first thing I would do, because I had seen so in my previous companies where I worked at, or the previous companies where I was working, was I would make this overview, in this case of contracts. I was used to making overviews of agreements. So who was which supplier, what did we supply, who was the client, what would they do, what was their core business. So pretty quickly I would know, okay, this is what they need, this is why they need it. And well, so I would be like, okay, this is the client, this is what they need. So they need this from us, this from someone else, and this from again someone else. And oh, that's where we come into play. So how do we work together? And well, apparently it wasn't the norm, but I would be able to get like 10 different suppliers together within the week, actually within a couple of days. If things didn't add up, I would explain it to them why it was important that they would come over. And I said, I don't want to hear this is not my territory. I want to hear if this is your territory and this is someone else's territory, how you're going to work together so you can check together why it's not working. That worked out quite well, by the way. But it was a new approach, and it was a very uncommon approach. But then again, for people who think on a strategic level, that should be the norm, because they need to have an overview of their entire company and what they're doing. But if you have a smaller company with only a few people, then the question, of course, becomes, how much of an overview do you actually have? And can you understand the people which are working there really well and why things are adding up and why not? And probably you will know, at some level, you can tell, like, yeah, it's, they want to give the clients a discount, which is nice for the clients, but it's not working for me. Others will say, yeah, those who do understand it, they look at what I'm doing, they're learning from it, and then I have to find a new employee and train them on the job again. And of course, there are those who say, well, I have to train them, but it's taking so long. And I still don't understand why they can do it themselves, And then when I say, well, how about if you take some time and maybe have them train with others? It's like, no, I don't have the money, I don't have the time. But if you look long term, it's going to cost you more in the end if you don't do it than if you do it. And there's more possible than we may consider at first, but it's, are you willing to look at possible solutions? So are you willing to look beyond what you consider your norm, your standard? Now, if you've been following me, then you know that I have this framework about speaking up in 7 ways with fun. And the reason I did so was because I wanted to let people know that even though it might be hard to speak up, you can train yourself to learn to speak up, whether it's by writing something down in a journal, whether it's by singing, so basically expressing your voice, or, in other various ways. There are a number of ways that you can actually get your message across, your voice across. And there's also something else that I did, which is about rewriting your inner story. So when I talk about expressing your voice and learning to speak up, it's not only a mindset, it's actually also the mechanics, how to learn to use that voice box and what's going on internally, which might prevent you from being able to speak up. When we talk about the mindset, and especially the source code, that's basically what it starts with. So it's based upon certain assumptions. So based on the time that you were born in, the culture, the things that were going on, and your experiences, you will think about things in a very different way compared to others. That's why I think it's kind of fun to be Gen X, because nowadays you see so many little, well, they are little when they're called shorts. You see so many shorts on, for instance, Instagram, but also elsewhere, about the ones who grew up in the 80s, like me. And they said, well, we had to act like 30 when we were in our teens, and now we are in 40s and in our 50s, and we are still pretending like we are in our 30s. And it's then they come up with the music from back then, and it's well, it was a different day and age. And what I think is very cool is that a lot of our kids are actually, they grew up with a lot of our music, for instance, and movies. So what I noticed at some point was there was a repetition of the same thing, but then with a different beat. And I guess that's one of the reasons that people at some point were going back to the source. But now, that last part, how do we get people to understand one another? Well, like I said, I made it my mission at some point. I noticed that because I grew up in a men's world, I was easily able to translate things between men and women. I'm a woman after all. But I also understand what's going on with the creatively gifted, the neurodivergents, who are growing up right now, or who were planning on finishing school or university, but never had the chance and never understood why things didn't work out. A lot of it is because I observe, and then pretty quickly I see what they're doing, or most importantly, what they're not doing. I always say, when people ask me what makes you a good coach, I say it's the things that are not being said, the things that are being skipped over. And actually, that's true. And when you see what people are missing, or, at some point they start to like stutter, go back and forth, or just, like I said, skip it all together. And oh, there's something that I need to pay attention to. So right now I'm teaching two kiddos from 8 and 11 years old how to learn, which is kind of sad because they go to school and I'm the one teaching them how to learn because, well, they're different. Being neurodivergent, in this case creatively gifted, well, first of all, their mind might go haywire. All the input, it's a lot, especially for the young ones out there, and not just for the neurodivergent, but for a lot of people. And some are able to shut down, and others are not, and they need time to process it. Well, I've seen it all, been there, done that, was on the receiving end growing up, and as a result, nowadays, I know better than most people out there what's missing. And because I've seen what's happened to the millennials, I know what can go wrong. And I see it happening over and over again, also in the younger generations. So I made it my mission to help them speak up, for them to allow to be themselves, as in be authentic, and also so they gain perspective again. But there was one thing that I've known for decades, and that's what I want to do is I want to work with those business owners who do not know how to communicate with their team. So it's not just about teaching them people skills, but it's also about explaining them why it's important to, take some more time to understand certain things, to talk to their people, and make sure that there's connection going on between the two. I can usually pretty quickly already figure out like, oh, this is going on, that's going on, just by asking questions. And people might not realize it straight away, but at some point they will come back to me and say, yeah, you were right. Yeah, I know I was right. I am a little, but yeah, that's experience. So talking today about the system scan has to do with something that I want to offer to you. And if you're interested, you can reach out to me and I'll send you a link. And that's about doing a system scan for you. So basically that would be, what are you running into? So hence on a processor, the hardware level. So what's not working out? Then the next thing is like, hey, what is it that you are running into? What might be the result of what you believe to be true, but in reality doesn't match with what others consider to be true? So then we can start to work on where it doesn't align and how we can get it to align. And that also means that where needed, I can train the other people out there to actually see things from a different perspective. But of course, it's far more powerful if you get to understand it yourself and you get to apply it, directed or guided, as I say it, by me. So I'm not the one who's going to tell you what to do, but I am going to explain to you why things work or do not work. And then it's up to you to come up with the right solutions. So I'm not here to know everything about everyone and what's going on in every company. That's the power of a coach. A coach is the one asking the questions to get you moving. But it helps to explain a thing or two and also have people see things from different perspectives. Now, if you are interested and you are one of those business owners who are like, oh, I could use some support here, then reach out to me and I'll do a 40-minute scan. But you might want to consider something else, because what I want to do is I want to take a group of the people reaching out to me for the system scans to San Diego. And together, we are going to form a group of people called the Steam Power Collective. So some of you might have heard me talking about Steam Power Collective before, but basically it's about business owners who want to have more respect in their business, but also more freedom. So they don't want to be doing the operational task unless, of course, they want to do them, but not because they must do them. And since we are working with like-minded people, it's going to be a group that will go on various trips. We'll have like 2 times a month that we are going full out, like 90 minutes or something. But during the week, on weekdays, there will be a max 40-minute touch up, as in we get to meet up. So it's going to be very quickly, 3 minutes each, about what you're doing, what you're working on, and what you want to do. If you want to talk about what's not working for you, that's during the other meeting. That way, you are expected to keep going on a level that sort of forces you to make the best of things. And one of the things that I always want to do is when I get people to work with me, especially during a trip, to already start implementing things while they are there. So if you want to be one of the founders, in this case, of the Steam Power Collective, like I said, max 12, and you would like to be in the San Diego area mid-February, then reach out to me and we can start just with the scan, see if we connect, and you can see how you want to continue on from there on. We'll talk about it, and well, let's see what you, well, how it can work out for you, because it might be like a short amount of time, but when you understand the key factors, then it's up to you. If you are going to rewrite your story, your inner story, your beliefs, or did you keep going on the way it was? And then I'll say, how did it work out for you? So if you're ready for change, you're ready for being able to work with all generations, then go find me. And if you want to know more about neurodivergence, be sure to check the other videos as well.